Hey, welcome everyone. Good morning, afternoon now, really. Could be
just
morning
now
where you are. Welcome to Designing Adobe XD. I am your host, Talon Wadsworth. I'm lead designer for Adobe XD, and today I'm joined by one of my favorite people in the world, really. Ainsley, my good colleague, Ainsley Wagner. Hi, Ainsley.
Hi.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
Have we ever streamed together? Or have you just
No.
always filled in for me?
Yeah, so this is really fun. Oh, no, we did one time.
No, we did. That's right.
We did.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while though. Back. It's been. I was just telling Ainsley, like we crossed a big milestone last week, doing our 50th episode of Designing Adobe XD,
Yep.
and it's now a blur, like the whole last year, like. So.
Yeah, I was watching some to kind of prepare for today and saw that last week was 50, and I was like, whoa, that's a big deal.
It's a pretty big deal.
And it's been you doing it every week.
Every week.
Pretty much.
It's been crazy.
And like, you're really good at it.
Well, thank you. So are you. That's why I always love having you on, because like we were saying, like we could talk design all day long, and so what better way to spend an afternoon than like talking with all of you about design. So what's going on, everybody? How's everybody in the chat doing today? A lot of familiar avatars and names popping up. I'd love to meet some of them.
I know.
In real life at some point.
Yeah.
All right, so we all have to coordinate, and we'll have to meet up sometime. Do an Adobe Live meetup. Have we done that? I don't know. That'd be
cool.
amazing.
Max. At Max,
Max is
yeah.
it. Okay, good.
That'd be
good.
wild.
All right. What's going on, Agnes and Pokey, Tim, Shreya? How's everybody doing today? Joaquim, Huxel, how's everybody
Huxel.
doing?
Hi from Virginia.
Yeah, what's going on in Virginia today? Designing cool things? Are you making cool stuff? Maybe using XD? Of course, we'd love to see it, so you should always, because we always love seeing the amazing work that you're doing out there in the world. But yeah, so we today, what are we going to talk about today, Ainsley?
Today, we're going to talk about learning. Yes.
Learning. It's a big topic.
It's a big topic.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about that today because that's kind of what I've been working on the team.
Yeah.
I've been kind of doing a deep dive specifically on how people learn XD. Of course, that's my job. And it's a big thing because it's also something that's really personal. So everybody kind of learns differently. And I think I feel really close to the topic of learning because I'm somebody who, I don't have a degree in UX design. I think a lot of people, it's a new field.
Yeah.
And so my particular journey to kind of this moment and having this job, there was a lot of learning on my own and kind of self-teaching in the beginning. And so when we are designing XD, the tool itself, but then content around that, we're thinking a lot about how people are able to learn on their own. And so I'm thinking about good, bad, ugly learning experiences and how we can kind of do that in the best way.
It's one of those areas where it's so important, because I think XD is such a new tool, right? And it really is breaking some of those established or maybe tried and true patterns from some of our the big names of the Adobe sort of portfolio, and that's been done very consciously. But again, it can be disruptive. Learning a new tool, can be very disruptive to a lot of people's workflows. And figuring out how to just get your work done a lot of times.
Yeah.
What was the first tool, like design tool, that you really learned and really got attached to?
Well, I think like I can go way back. When I was a kid,
Yeah,
I loved Corel Draw.
Ooh, talk about Corel. What was it about Corel Draw? I mean, that's actually a really big sort of thing that like someone who is unfamiliar with the industry or the best practices can come in and use a tool to do something creative.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my like very first design experiences, and I remember, I think I associate that a lot with the fact that we had just gotten a new computer. It was the 90s. Like to have our own PC was really exciting. Hewlett Packard. And and it was also like my dad kind of showed it to me. And started messing with it. So it was like something fun we could do together. But I figured out really quickly that I could sort of design covers for my notebooks. So like a 3-ring binder with a clear cover, I could be like, this is my piano book, and I could grab like the clip art and choose a typeface and customize my notebooks, and that was really exciting to me. And that was like the first kind of way that I could satisfy, besides things I was sort of doing in my own room, like the desire to design your own thing and to have a notebook that like was
customized
for me.
Really demystifying a lot of that process probably in you know, as you were doing it. So was it more of a like you know, like trial and error kind of scenario, or do you remember anything about Corel that really helped you understand it and start to use it? Did it feel like you ramped up very quickly, or did it take you a while to kind of master a lot of the basics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think like speaking about like childhood learning, like I had a parent there who was kind of like showing me, and I quickly figured it out on my own, but I probably stayed within the relative lane that he had introduced me to.
Yeah, you know, that actually really resonates, you know, and actually we're kind of interested in all of your experiences as well. I wanted to, of course, say hello to a few people who jumped in too. Chris Cannon as well. Katerina, what's going on, Katerina? Everyone, if you haven't tried out the Undraw plugin for XD, you should. It's delightful. And Katerina is the mastermind and the talent behind that, so you should go check it out. You know, like a lot of people learn tools from someone else.
Yep.
Right?
Totally.
And what that means is I remember learning to do some things in Photoshop back when I first learned Photoshop, and it was shown by someone else, and I kind of did that for a while, and until someone told me that like maybe I could do it better, or I was doing it wrong. You know?
Totally.
So like because I mean that is a lot of the way that people learn is like you're working in a scenario and someone else like shows it could be work, could be school, could be outside of all of that. Someone says, hey, look how to do this cool thing.
Yeah.
And you do, and you say, all right, and then you learn that, and you do it over and over and over again, and that's the way you do it now. For pretty much, can tell you learn differently.
Yeah, I mean, and so fast forward for me to college. I studied architecture, and so really early on they had us learn kind of the basic Adobe design suite, and said use Photoshop to kind of make your presentations. And at least for me in school, there wasn't a lot of time spent actually like showing us how to use those tools. And so I was like calling up my graphic design friend who was older and like working in the field because I didn't understand how to do basic things.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the concept of layers in Photoshop because I was kind of.
Oh, that's a really.
I think you know I'm just kind of like connecting this, but to me, I like even from like Corel days, like I had like a vector mindset of everything kind of being flat out on your table. So yeah, I completely leaned on a friend.
Yeah.
And like classmates.
You know, I have Photoshop up here on my desktop, and if you think about kind of the new user experience, you know, for Photoshop, it can be very intimidating, right? I mean, I remember that same thing when I was first trying to figure out, you know, how to design something. Like when you're faced with all of this, like how do you start using it? Pokey was saying that it started with Photoshop a couple of years ago. You know, Pokey, like how did you learn Photoshop? What did you turn to start to figure out how to use Photoshop? I mean, when you're sort of faced with this blank canvas, right? And again, like it can be very intimidating. Any creative tool can be very intimidating, right? So how do you make sense of all of this? And what's cool is that there's, you know, I think I started to learn Adobe design tools as more and more resources were starting to appear online and more communities were available that I could really rely on. You know, I could go and Illustrator. That's how I learned how to do a lot of things in Illustrator. So I actually went to these Tumblr blog posts.
Oh wow!
Like way back,
cool.
And they were like describing like these illustrators who had figured things out in Illustrator themselves, maybe, or learned from someone else. They've sort of like made these repositories of like really exciting learning content, like how to sort of do things better inside of Illustrator. And you know, of course, and you know, what's been really great to see in our time here at Adobe, I think, is to actually see more and more of these, you know, concepts start to try and, you know, bring their way like into the applications. Again, this wasn't always the case that you could come in and actually like take a tour through the basics of Photoshop. And
Right.
I think the team's been here at Adobe been doing really interesting things to, again, to actually recognize that like, hey, these are really hard tools. We need to give people a really easy way to get up and going.
Yeah.
Kind of in here. So
People are saying they relied on YouTube a lot.
I still, if there's like something that I
yeah.
need to understand how to do in Lightroom or Photoshop, I still turn to YouTube.
Oh yeah, yeah, I do as well. I think it's interesting too to think about learning on your own versus being in a situation where you're influenced by someone you're working with. So that's kind of like you have to be lucky in a way to like be in a job or a learning environment where someone next to you can like show you some of those tools.
Do you think that like that the trend has been away from more on the job learning to more on your own kind of learning, like overall? Do you think that that's been like a trend? I mean, back when there were less resources, you really had to rely on your own sort of fumblings, right? To make it through here, or you had to rely on the manuals, like the big thick sort of manuals that came along with software. But like I can't read and like learn. I have to like visually like experience it or see it myself.
I do think that the trend has been away from that. I think, but mostly because we're always going to do what's easiest for us. And as like there are more and more resources, the longer these tools are out there, the more resources there are on the internet of other people who have figured things out. And so it's easier and easier to just Google your very specific question of the thing that you're struggling with, whether it's like learning how to, I think that something I Googled the other day was like just figuring out how to write on curved text in Illustrator. It's like I know how to do that. I've done it, but it's been a couple of years. And there's one way to do it where it kind of like does it around the outside, but I wanted it flipped. And so I Googled that very specific thing and found results right away, both from the Adobe help pages and also just like, muggles like me.
Yeah. Tim is saying that the first version of Photoshop had a VHS cassette with it.
Wow.
To like teach you how to use Photoshop. That's amazing.
Oh, I would love
wow.
to get my
Okay,
hands on that.
we need to see that. I mean, back with like that speaks to something like that they're like people learn differently.
Yeah.
YouTube I think is probably like probably the biggest resource going for design tools right now. For any tools, like if I want to, change the oil in my car, I go to YouTube, right? Or anything that I haven't done before. I'm like, someone's gonna make a video of that, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting though what it speaks to me. That just like the amount of effort that people put into to helping other people learn stuff is kind of amazing.
It really is like what restores my hope in the internet. And the humanity of the internet is like, it's full of so many people helping each other.
Yeah. Look at this experience. Actually, I haven't run through this before. This experience is kind of blowing my mind a little bit. Like this is a very scripted sort of experience. Look at I'm like following through. Have any of you run through this? I mean, this actually is kind of interesting and something that maybe that you've been dealing with. Are you designers out there? Are you the type that actually follow along with tutorials or maybe read the little messages that pop up? Or are you the kind that, like me, I'm just like sort of like clicking next to like get through this? Do you like a more scripted experience like this? Or are you maybe a person who just wants to get in and start using the tool and just like poking around and really just trying to figure it out just by doing that? I mean, is that something that you've been thinking about when it comes to designing new experiences for XD? Is actually having a more hands-on, more less of a guided experience and much more of a hands-on trial and error kind of experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I appreciate Paco's comments as well. Yeah, that is the way that you kind of become really skilled, is by following your own path of the questions you have, and I think moving away from the style of learning, like in school where you're served up a curriculum, that's great too, but I think like following your own curiosity really builds skills.
And Steve was actually saying that like he got to the point of being able to like very quickly. A friend installed Photoshop, and he was able to just like start to get the sense of what Photoshop can do by adjusting contrast and brightness. By just playing around. I mean, look how far they've come, Steve, in Photoshop. I mean, this is a full-on sort of like experience about photo, image compositing, right? Like, for a long time, I could not. Actually, that's one of the reasons why I probably didn't gravitate towards Photoshop, because I felt at a huge disadvantage on like photo compositing. I always felt like I still never quite mastered like that part of Photoshop because it is so complex. And the series of steps that you have to take to produce a really amazing result when it comes to photoshopping an image together, like it takes many steps to be able to do that. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I guess to go back to your question about thinking about how this way of learning, like looking at kind of a Photoshop guided tutorial and thinking about how we do that for the people who use XD. For our users, I have been kind of spending a lot of time with our tutorial content, and the thing that, I mean, I've learned a lot of things, and I want to share that with you all, but I think to your point, it's really interesting because there's different types of people that are coming in, and so there's, in this case where we have Photoshop guided tutorial, this is really great for someone who is brand new to Photoshop. So when I was like, 19 years old, a sophomore in college, and my teacher said, you need to make your presentation in Photoshop and you have a week. Yeah. And it was brand new to me. This would have been really helpful. Yeah. And I'm really glad that Adobe kind of has we recognize that there are certain tools that are so powerful, but they're intimidating at first. So we have these kinds of experiences.
I mean, actually, that was something that when we actually sat down to design XD, that actually we were actually really responding to. Yeah. Was that we wanted to build a powerful tool, something that people could do professional work in, but was streamlined. For making it actually easy for people to pick up and to learn. Yeah. And that was actually one of the goals that we had, as a team, was to be able to do that, to be able to, again, like streamline that experience, to put more of the power of the tool, like at the ready, rather than having to sort of like piece together, and begin, like Photoshop, of course, didn't start this way. Right. Photoshop grew in complexity over time. But you do have to choreograph a lot of the pieces to be able to feel successful, and then and that's where the learning curve jumps up. Right? Is that how the number of steps and the things that you have to do and their distribution throughout the UI ramps up the difficulty in learning how to use that tool. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like we're dealing with a balance in XD of people who are coming in totally fresh, who are maybe not coming from even a design background. Maybe they have no familiarity with Adobe tools on one hand. And then, so we're trying to serve them, but then on the other hand, there's people who have been using other tools and who we're trying to kind of get to come over and see the value of XD really quickly. And so it's a really interesting balance of both like holding people's hand, but also letting them kind of jump in right away. And I think that's something that kind of you see in the Camp Vibes tutorial, our existing tutorial. Yep.
So actually one of the things about learning, right? Like actually this is me having used XD a lot. So my experience is different from the brand new user. So part of this effort is actually like when you launch the app for the first time, we really are trying to guide you, into the areas that are going to help you be most successful in the future. So here's Camp Vibes. Tell us about Camp Vibes, Ainsley.
So I think this is like a really interesting hybrid of both a sample file, so it has a bunch of stuff in it that you can kind of go in and take apart, but it's also our way of kind of making what we were seeing with Photoshop, which is a guided experience.
Yeah.
So you look from the beginning, there's a hierarchy of even the size of things, like to get you into the file.
Yeah, it really is like a meta design.
Yeah.
Like it's like layers of design meta-ness happening here in this file.
I mean, like as somebody who works on XD, it's kind of a really fun challenge because you're designing a tutorial sample file inside of XD with the limitations of XD, which is like, we have coach marks, we have some things that are interactive, but this is not able to, it has to really kind of speak to you without being there next to you.
The other thing that's kind of interesting here too is that it's not showing off everything that XD can do, right? This is a very guided experience, again in a very free-form way to help you learn the core of XD, the core workflows like of XD.
Yeah, I think the main things with that we're wanting to do here, and I'm not the original designer of this you are. But I've gotten to know it really well because I worked on it last year to update it and add a couple of features that we wanted to add in, and then some things have changed. For instance, a big thing that's changed is all the ways that you can share at the end. So I think that what's kind of interesting about this is like we have to show impact right away. You have to sort of like first very briefly tell people the shortcuts and how to navigate, but then very quickly show them the value of XD, which to me kind of boils down to showing some killer features right away.
Yeah.
Everybody loves repeat grid, so we do that pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly. Here it is.
Yeah,
right?
There's we start with the basics of like moving things around, creating art boards, and then we show repeat grid. Because even though, I mean, for us, this feature has been out for several years, it still is the thing that people, it shows right away how this is going to make your life easier.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, someone was actually mentioning again, like this is actually the daily creative challenge being a great way to get up and going and learning about XD as well. And yes, that's totally right. Like Dean, and that's what we've really found over time is actually this was one of the first efforts that we did, and again, like this has been 3 years ago now, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, probably 3 years ago now. And of course, over that time, we've added more to the kind of ecosystem of tools available to help you to learn XD, and Adobe Live has been part of that.
Yeah.
Again, like this is a great thing if you're just starting with XD and you actually want to get some hands-on experience. I think that's what's kind of great here is that this kind of balances learning with like just hands-on, like taking the features for a spin.
Totally.
Kicking the tires, as it were. This is really that, kicking the tires, helping you feel successful immediately, helping you understand some of the core workflows. But again, there's so much here. So how do you think about how all those pieces fit together, Ainsley, as you're trying to both design some of the in-app experiences? Are you thinking about, again, like the other parts of the system that people also might be interacting with? Like, how are you approaching kind of creating new and exciting ways to learn XD in the application?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this context where I know that I'm designing for and talking to people who are kinetic learners, right? Like they learn by doing. And so, but at the same time, I'm not there showing them, and they're not watching a video, although there is a video that goes along with this that I think really helps and is people have said is really effective. But at the same time, you're writing words and you're showing pictures for people who really want to just be playing around. And so I think keeping that in mind, it's all about really thinking. It's a interesting exercise in copywriting, actually.
Oh yeah.
Thinking about what you're saying and keeping it really concise. Thinking about the words you're using to direct people in different places, and thinking about what's the minimum space but maximum impact of images you're using to show people where the assets panel is and where the repeat grid tool is, and little hints like that.
Yeah.
So.
Has it made you think about XD differently as you've been doing that? Like, is it like as you've been sort of both writing and sort of sort of prototyping and sketching out these workflows? Has it made you think about XD in a different way than you did before?
I mean, yeah, I think like as I work on all different parts of the app, it's all really what happens is my appreciation for the work that came before me really grows, because I think as it is, it's a we're talking about our kind of first learning experiences with Photoshop. XD is a really accessible app to open. It's like bright and clean and simple, and I know that that's like one of the foundational principles of it. And so I think working on content that sort of tries to teach people using words and images increases my appreciation for how simple the app itself is. You don't have to, you're able to sort of point to things in a way that doesn't take a long article to say like go up under this menu and choose this thing. And I think that's still really the beauty of the app.
Or go to this menu and this sub-menu and this, and then go inside of this dialog and select this option. Yeah, like the path, like the number of operations to get to the successful outcome are kind of put right in front of you. That was actually, where that inspiration came from was actually Fireworks.
Really?
Fireworks was kind of the inspiration for a lot of the organization, like of the features and also the priority of the features and like how they sort of introduce themselves to you. So Fireworks, if anyone knows, is definitely heard me say it before, is one of my favorite tools. Did you use it when you joined Adobe Design, or they already phased it out?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, they pretty much had already sunsetting at that point, but it was very inelegant. But it was this one piece of UI, and it was one panel. So in Fireworks, to do every piece of work that you need to do as a designer who's designing assets for the screen, everything you needed was right there. It was quite inelegant, I will say. The experience of it was not great. But what it did was it took, again, in Photoshop, what would be, again, in this submenu, in this panel, in a bunch of different places, just to get the job done that you were trying to do, it was all right there, right in front of you, inside of Fireworks. Which meant that it just felt more efficient to use. It was accurate for screen, but everything that I wanted to do, that I needed to do day in, day out, was right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were more advanced stuff. There was really crazy stuff you could do with Fireworks, but again, like those are things that you would do sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, and I think that that's the base knowledge or the base assumption of the Camp Vibes tutorial. And then as I'm looking at like how to improve upon this and how this content evolves, that's the base assumption is give people the main things they need and then begin to direct them elsewhere for the more advanced features. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking from inside the design team, because there's really amazing advanced resources out there that actually
like letsxd.com.
Yeah.
Everyone, of course, if you've been doing the creative challenges and following along with Mr. Howard Pinsky, again, like this resource that Ainsley has up. Actually, we're getting close to the end, but everyone should go check out letsxd.com because it's amazing. But yes, it is again like we are trying to really, as a design team, really choreograph a great experience and to recognize that people learn very differently. And that, again, you might have come from another tool, or you might, be, more familiar with, Photoshop and other ones. And, how do we make a great experience for kind of everybody coming in to learn XD, to learn the best practices, really, of UX and UI design? Again, that's really one of the challenges that we have a good time, I think, thinking about and tackling. And I think we're going to expect some great stuff coming at the end of this year, and of course more as well from Ainsley and the rest of the team as they really think about like how do we keep evolving and helping you become like really well versed in using XD and creating great results. So, yeah. Well, that just like flew by, of course, as the 30-minute stream always does. Thank you all for joining us. Again, hopefully you guys got some insight into how we work and think about how we design Adobe XD. And in the end of the day, we just want to help you create great stuff. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Talon. Thanks for chiming in, everybody, on the live stream.
It was great. And we will be back next week with another episode. And you guys all have a great weekend. See ya.
Bye.